Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 345 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Ayalon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and an author. Our third book is called From Letters to Leaders, Leveraging Your Fraternity or Sorority Experience to Land Your Dream Job. That is on Amazon. Go and pick up that book today. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring college students together. Fun fact, we get leads for new podcast interviews from so many different sources. Sometimes it comes from one of our podcast listeners. Sometimes it comes from another speaker in the higher ed industry. And sometimes it can even come from a family member. We interviewed Sonia Wasden in episode 268 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast, and we talked about Sonia's struggles with mental health and her suicide attempt. Today, her daughter is on our show to talk about mental health from the perspective of the children. So today we have with us Rachael Siddoway, an award-winning and best-selling author, despite being diagnosed with severe dyslexia at age 8. Her first book is called An Impossible Life. This is a bestseller and an Eric Hoffer Grand Prize winner. Her second book, An Impossible Wife, is a Benjamin Franklin Gold Medal winner. Rachael has been interviewed in all 50 states on local and national news, including CBS This Morning and the Tamron Hall Show. Rachael has traveled the country speaking with organizations, mental health advocacy groups, government officials, and media outlets about her family's personal experiences with mental health struggles and about the stigmas that surround mental illness. She is an author, a keynote speaker, and a mental health advocate. She graduated from Brigham Young University with a BA in art education. Of course, a lover of cats and poetry. She lives in Houston, Texas with her husband, Brett, and her daughter, Indigo. Welcome to the show, Rachael.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Hey, it is a pleasure to have you on the show. And my daughter's name is Rachael, so I instantly have affection for you.
That's why I got on.
That's the only reason. Your name was Rachael. All right, book her on the show. So let's talk a little bit just about the early life, because you were diagnosed with severe dyslexia at age 8. Tell our audience, what was that like growing up with dyslexia?
Yeah, so growing up with dyslexia, I feel like I didn't understand how hard it was for me at the time. I just knew I couldn't learn for whatever reason. So reading it almost felt like my mom would practice with me, and no matter how many times we'd go over the sounds that the letters make, it just didn't comprehend. And so sounding out longer words like the word because or whatever, it was very hard to grasp. It was almost like oil and marbles just like rolling past, and I couldn't really see letters clearly. But I do remember people, when they would find out in middle school, they're like, oh my gosh, I heard you're dyslexic. I didn't know you were stupid. And I was like, yeah, it would appear so. Shocker to both of us, I guess. So there was, when I was growing up, dyslexia was kind of viewed as a special needs sort of thing. So I got pulled out of class to go to reading groups and stuff. But
Man, kids can be so brutal. I feel you, like, just hearing that and just getting crushed like there's something wrong with me, right? I mean, oh my goodness, my heart just bleeds for you. And so, all right, but you started writing novels at the young age of 12. So what was this early fascination with writing?
it was so interesting. Even though I couldn't read for a long time and reading was so hard, writing is kind of where I took my power back, because I was like, I can go in a Word document and I can write something that no one has to see. And the words can be misspelled, the grammar can be wrong, but I get to kind of push myself into literature. I get to be in control of it. So it was freeing for me that a teacher didn't have to grade, F on my paper. I could just go home and write a book, and no one could tell me otherwise that it was wrong.
Well, you're certainly a fantastic writer today. So I love that you've been writing since age 12, and you've obviously taken your power back and then some. So that's just fantastic. Now, I did interview your mom on our show, and your mom, Sonia, she managed bipolar, OCD, and anxiety disorders for over 30 years. So I'm wondering, for you, when did you first notice that there was a problem with your mom, and how did that kind of take over your life as her daughter?
I first noticed there was something wrong with her probably when I was 8 years old, and I would have to hide the kitchen steak knives in our house because she would self-harm. She liked to cut the bottom of her feet. So before school each day, I would go throughout the house and I would hide them in obscure places. And I just felt the need to protect her from some sort of pain she was in. I didn't know what self-harm was at the time, but I just knew her life was at risk. And so I was always trying to keep an eye out for dangerous things.
Wow. Oh my goodness. I can't even imagine. At 8 years old, like that's a huge realization for somebody who's only 8. I mean, maybe as like a late teens or something like that, then maybe you can start to process what self-harm is and what's happening here. It's just unbelievable. I can't even imagine what that would be like for you. And the CDC has said that a child's mental health is tied to their parents' mental health. So, what did you feel when you found her suicide note at age 16?
I was devastated. I felt like my mom was selfish for wanting to leave her family and take her own life. I came home from a friend gathering and I saw on a computer a Word document that my mom had written, suicide notes to each of her children, like these goodbye letters. And I was just like, how dare she? We've all worked so hard to keep her happy and alive, and she's just going to leave. But through writing her memoir, I learned she didn't want to leave my family. It wasn't personal. She just wanted to leave the pain she was in. But that's hard to grasp when you can't see the pain she's in. So it feels very personal.
Oh my goodness. Wow. You have just been through so much. I mean, obviously I spoke to your mom and we talked about her experiences, but I didn't really think about it or process it from the vantage point of the rest of her family, her husband, her kids. I mean, it really is all encompassing. And I think it's important that we talk about that when we talk about mental illness, how it affects everybody. It's not just that one person. And a recent research study showed that a parent's greatest concern is actually not kidnapping or drugs or alcohol or even teen pregnancy. It's actually their children's mental health. So, in your opinion, how can a parent ensure their child's mental health?
That's a great question. I know growing up, I felt like my mom and I's mental health was tethered to each other. So at times when I was her caregiver, I felt like my heart beat for the wrong body because I was so entrenched in her bipolar disorder. And it was when she started getting therapy and improving that my mental health started to improve. And I think a lot of parents are concerned about their child's mental health, but they would rather blame social media first or their friend group instead of maybe turning in to their home and saying, hey, maybe I have more power than I realize in not curing, but influencing my child's mental health. Because I did notice when my mom prioritized her well being, I almost felt like I had permission to prioritize mine. I was like, oh, this is important. I should take ownership of this. And it also changed the dynamic within our home when my mom's mental health improved. Obviously, the home felt happier because mom was happier. So
Oh my goodness. Wow. This is incredible stuff. All right. So now you and your mom wrote An Impossible Life. This is the 2022 Eric Hoffer Book Award Grand Prize winner. What was it like to collaborate with your mom on writing this book? And what are you most proud of in terms of this particular book?
it was a fun experience because since we both lived the life together in a lot of ways, we had different perspectives on how certain events went. So
Mhm.
there was some give and take there of like, hey, whose perspectives you lean more into, or if there were things my mom wasn't comfortable sharing, I kind of pushed her to share more vulnerable things. But writing the book with her was so healing for me because I felt like I got to step inside her shoes and see life from her perspective. And it just gave me greater compassion for her bipolar disorder and the suicide attempt, that I felt like I completely get why you made the choices you made, even if you would make different choices now. And then I think for her too, it probably felt good to feel like her daughter understands her and wrote a book that she's like, oh my gosh, you do see me because you wrote it exactly how I told you. And so I don't know, there were definitely moments where, we might get in a little fight and she would just be like, okay, but you understand this moment probably better than anyone else. So I'm glad we can heal together through this.
I'm sure that she definitely felt seen, because you went through this process with her. And so I know how important that is. And I also know, as somebody who's written 3 books now, it is often very therapeutic to put your words down on paper. I remember I went through a difficult time professionally, and then I ended up taking a course in ethics at a local college campus for a master's degree. And like the words just wrote themselves. I mean, I locked myself in a room in my office all day long, and it was just so therapeutic to put it all down on paper. I had not been seeing a therapist or anything like that, but just the feeling that you get when you put it down on paper, it's almost relieving in a sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so
It's
I
like that famous quote, how do I know what I think or how do I know what I think until I see what I say or something? It's like
yeah,
when you see the words, you almost understand yourself better.
totally. When I see it on paper, then I'm like, oh, okay, this is what's going on. But it's just really hard for your brain to process all of that stuff, especially when it's going on over a long period of time. You just have to get it out. And if it wasn't for that ethics class, I don't think it ever would have come out of me. But the teacher almost forced me with that writing prompt to get it down on paper. And boy, oh boy, it was just an incredible document. The professor, he had been teaching ethics for 30 years. He said that was the best paper he's ever read from any
Wow,
student. And it wrote itself, I swear. Like, I literally did not stop typing for an entire day, and it
that's
just wrote itself.
amazing.
So, it was just waiting to come out.
Therapy session that was long overdue.
It was definitely long overdue. I probably should have seen a therapist to talk about it, but it did eventually get out on paper. So that's really good. Now, you're writing an impossible childhood. Tell our audience, when is that book going to be coming out, and what will readers learn from this particular book in the series?
Yeah, so this book will hopefully be coming out end of this year. And this book has a lot more comic relief, I would say, than my mom's book did.
Mm,
Purely because you see a lot of strange behavior my mom does to the lens of a child, and children don't quite grasp some of the heavier things. And so for me, a lot of it was just quirky and it was just mom being mom. And then as I grow up throughout the book, it gets heavier. Um, but yeah, it kind of touches on my mom and I's enmeshment. For a long time, we had an enmeshed relationship, which is where the parent views their child as an extension of themselves to get their own needs met. And so it was through her and I, and that, in a way it was good because I could help her with her bipolar disorder, but I lost my own identity in that role. So the book ends with me figuring out that we have an enmeshed relationship and then us working on becoming individuals again, but still having a good, close friendship. You don't have to completely have no relationship, but
yeah.
definitely no longer enmeshed, which is good.
What an amazing relationship that you and your mom have. That's just absolutely incredible, and I love that you're writing it with some comedy relief. I think that's always good to add into a book. So, what resources should college students use if they, or maybe another student on campus that they care for, needs help?
I would definitely recommend DBT therapy. That's dialectical behavior therapy. I know there's books on Amazon. Some campuses even advocate the DBT program. That's what has changed my family's culture and lives as far as therapy goes.
Mm,
Obviously, NAMI also is a great resource. They have a lot of, counseling and free phone call services you can access. So for our personal experience, I would definitely recommend NAMI and DBT therapy, as well as mindfulness and Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now. I feel like a lot of those self-awareness books are very essential to learning how your brain, can free itself from intrusive thoughts or mental illness.
great information, great resources. I love all of them. One of our speakers actually works for NAMI, so can't say enough good things about that organization. Just really, really incredible stuff. And, in dealing with college students, especially after the pandemic and all the isolation that these college students have all been through, I'm wondering, from your perspective, how can we create a culture of mental wellness on college campuses?
That is a fantastic question. I think the younger generations are so proactive, and I love seeing how they're all into self-care days and, breaking stigma. So I feel like there's a very teachable audience at our hands.
Mhm.
And as far as creating a culture of mental wellness, I think a lot of it is advocating for yourself, that you have to be aware of your own mental health to know how to advocate for it. Because if you're not self-aware, then you don't know that you need help or you don't know how to get the help. So a lot of times it's just having a support system, whether it's other students or professors that are sympathetic to your needs, and they can give you the, self-care you need, or let you take the self-care you need, whether that's a day, off or an hour off, or just talking with someone about how you're doing.
Yeah, I think we've definitely made progress in terms of reducing the stigma surrounding getting help, seeing a therapist, and certainly all the college students who are listening right now, you have access to the counseling center on your campus. So please use that resource. I feel like that would have been really helpful for me had I used that as a college student. It wasn't until I was an adult that I actually go and talk to a therapist. And I feel like, it was so many missed opportunities. And to have that as a resource for the college students, I would just definitely take advantage of it, especially if you're feeling anxiety, if you're feeling any kind of stress and things like that. This is like just, exactly what the counseling center is for. And you might as well use it. Your tuition is already paying for it. So it is free. Just go ahead and use it. So I do think we've made a lot of progress in terms of reducing that stigma. I think college students today are okay with talking about that, which is great. So we've made progress. I know, even in fraternities as well, it's not really the norm for men to be sharing how they're feeling. And if you look at a lot of the research, really, men don't have a lot of people to confide in. And so I think, having that outlet is really, really great. And I've seen more even fraternity men who you wouldn't think would be talking about mental health are actually opening up and having some really vulnerable discussions with each other, and it's okay. And so it's been really great to see that change over time. Certainly when I was in the chapter, that was not a part of our conversation. Mental health never really, it just wasn't a topic for us. And so I'm glad to see that progress. I think we're making.
Oh, I agree. I just went to a prison for veterans, a lot of veterans who have ended up in prison. And we talked about that exact thing, how, especially within their community, they were taught to just be tough,
Yeah.
masculine men. And
Mhm.
that doesn't mean you dive into your inner feelings. And so we do workshops on how do you do that? And it doesn't take away masculinity, or what does it even mean to be a man? And so within prison, they have these great programs where they're learning how to redefine what it means to be a man of character, right? And that doesn't mean being hardened to your emotions at all.
Right. Yeah, and it's kind of contrary, just like said, it's contrary to the way that we were raised. I know, my parents when I was very young were just like, "Hey, why are you crying? That's not something that boys or men should be doing." And so, we were just taught from a very young age to suppress all of those things and to not show it. And then it should be no wonder that later in life, we get into a relationship and they're like, "You don't have any emotions." It's like because I've been taught my whole life not to show them. You know,
Isn't that funny? The things the wives or girlfriends or whatever can complain about are usually what their moms were taught, like teaching them.
a hundred
It's
percent. Like
funny.
this
You
is what
aren't
my mom
emotionally
taught me.
available. You aren't vulnerable. It's like, well, I was told not to be.
Right. It's like a whole re-education process. So for everybody who's listening, please understand there is a reason why they're not showing emotion. They were probably taught that by their mom. Okay. I'm just letting you know. And so, but it doesn't mean that we can't change. It doesn't mean that, we can't improve and start, hacking away at that outer surface that might be really tough and hardened. We can make progress. And I'm probably living proof of that. So, so there is hope. There is hope for all those guys out there, and I'm just glad to see the progress. I do think we're making some real progress, and I think it's almost like a generational thing too. I think Gen Z, they're just much more open to having these types of conversations, whereas the older generations, my parents, boomers, and things like that, are just it's just a different generation.
Yeah,
It's
they
just-
kind of find it all nonsense. It is funny to sit and talk with even some of my grandparents, and they're like snowflake generation.
right.
Like, I mean, that's one way to look at it. Or, maybe we're more in tune or more sensitive, which is also not a bad thing.
Yeah, definitely. You can see those generational differences. Now, I know you live near Houston, and we love really good food here at the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I'm wondering, where do you and your family go for a great meal in the Houston area?
Oh, that's easy. Tin Roof Barbecue. They have barbecue here like nowhere else. So we go to Big Papa's Barbecue or Tin Roof Barbecue, and they're so good.
Very nice. So you right up my alley. Obviously, I live in Nashville, Tennessee. We know something about barbecue here too. So
Mhm.
that's it's perfect. I will definitely next time I'm in Houston, I'm gonna hit up those restaurants and try out the barbecue, and then we can compare who's got the better barbecue. Fair
Yeah,
deal?
I'd be curious to know. I bet Tennessee might have us beat just a little.
Yeah, it's really good. It's a part of the culture here. So yeah, they definitely specialize in barbecue. But anytime you're in Nashville, let me know, and I'd be happy to take you around some of the barbecue spots here. It's really good.
I would love that.
All right. So if our college student listeners, if they want to buy your books, or perhaps they want to bring you in to come and speak on their college campus, where should they go to connect with you?
They can go to animpossiblelife.com, which is our website, or if they want a book, they can go to Amazon. We have it on Kindle, Audible, and paperback.
Perfect. So it's an impossiblelife.com. Go and check out that website because I was just really blown away at how extensive that is, how big the book series is really getting, bios on both the authors and just the whole story. It's all laid out really, really well. And I feel like there's something for everybody here, no matter if you are a parent or you are a child. I think there's something for everybody to learn here. So go and check out that book series. I think it's absolutely phenomenal. And Rachel, thank you so much for sharing your perspective. Again, I think all too often we think about the person who is going through these mental health challenges, but we don't think about all of the supporting characters, all the people around them that's trying to support them as best they can, and what impact that has on their lives. And clearly, your mom has made a big impact in your life and your direction and your mission in life.
Well, thank you so much. It was a great conversation.
Yes, I really enjoyed it. So thank you so much, Rachel, for being here. And to our listeners, if you like this conversation with Rachel, make sure that you like it, make sure that you share it with other college students. And we hope to see you on another episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. Thanks so much for joining us, and we're going to see you next time.